Hi, and welcome to the Generation Connection. I'm Natalie Weinstein, and today I am not going to be your host. I will turn that job over to my associate, Ken Knowles, who is a builder, mechanical engineer, and today, interviewer. So welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the task from my shoulders and putting me in the hot seat.
Thank you, Natalie. I'd like to first thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today and be our guest and tell us a little bit about yourself. You've had 40 plus years of design experience and...
I started when I was 2.
Actually, a little bit more than 40.
Would you just want to give us a quick synopsis of how you came into this business and the changes you've seen leading up to your current position?
Well, I started out at the age of 10 working for my aunt and uncle in their fuel oil business, being their junior assistant to the bookkeeper and answering the telephones. I worked my way up to giving piano lessons to work my way through college and decided that I would listen to my mother and become a public school teacher because then I would have security, which I did for about 3 years. Married at the time, and when my husband decided to go into the building business, he asked me to help him decorate his models. And since we used up every last penny we had in purchasing the land and building the models, and he had no one to decorate them that he could afford to pay for, he asked his wife, who he thought had some talent in that way. And I abruptly refused and decided that if I was going to do this, I would have to go back to school and learn to do it. Which I did. And when I went to design school, I discovered that I really loved it and decided to change careers. I did decorate his models. Actually, I didn't really decorate them. I sort of staged them. Of course, in that time, they didn't call it staging. We just didn't have any money to buy furniture. So I put a plant here and a picture there and something there, and it actually sold the model. So I don't know if I was the very first stager. It might have been the cave woman before me. I'm not quite sure, but staging was then not something you knew about, and designing was something I was just learning about. But it became something that I really wanted to do, and so over the course of the past 40 years, I've developed a design firm. I have 7 people who work for me and with me, and started a home decorating club about 10 years ago to help people take that learning journey to a beautiful home with me and give them design advice. And it's been my life's passion and probably will continue to be so, Ken.
And with that design club, and I believe you've done some books and TV shows, this is how you go about passing on your knowledge you've collected over these years to hundreds of thousands of people that would like to know what the new and upcoming trends and styles are in decoration.
Well, thanks to the encouragement of Richard Starkey, who has been my accountant for a good portion of my career, he's encouraged me to fly and do things in an entrepreneurial way that probably most other designers don't see as their vision. But I learned early on, through Richard and others who actually mentored me, that if you don't share what you're good at, the rewards are not anywhere near enough to make up for it financially. And so that became sort of my mission. And as a result of it, and through shows like this where we talk about the generation connection, I've discovered that the more you teach, the more you learn.
The interesting thing, again, in design, design is about adaptation, and intergenerational is about adaptation. As the generations adapt, and the young people today have been brought up where everything has been done for them. The young generation have houses, or expect houses, that have been, everything's in there. Depending upon the community, and I guess in different locations, we may have different results. Have you found that this has been a change in the way that people expect or deal with things? And how do you deal with it in today's design? Do we now provide fully furnished houses, fully furnished rehouses, or not rehouses, but
Well, two things about what you've asked me, Richard. The first question is how things have changed for families and homes today, which brings me to the point of young people today who can't always afford to even buy or rent any place and move back home. So we have a whole generation of people whose homes have to readapt to an adult child coming home, sometimes alone after college, and sometimes married or with a family, while they're trying to save money to buy their own place. So the style of life today is so different from when we were young people growing up, where the assumption was you went to school, you went to college, you got a job, you could buy a house, you saved some money, or you rented an apartment. And today's lifestyle doesn't always give young people that opportunity.
have we really, in effect, maybe moved more towards the European model? Because in the European model, people have always lived with families, and families, different levels of families have lived together, and families have been there. The American way has always been that people moved out, at least for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And now, maybe because of necessity, we're now moving back. It's interesting because the generations can actually use each other. With the aging of the baby boomers, you have a need for, as people move up on age into their 60s, 70s, 80s, you have a need for families to now take care of parents. You have an inability of the kids who have large college debts and large mortgages, if they have houses, maybe not being able to deal with things. You have the issue, how do you take care of mom and dad? How is taking care of mom and dad affected design?
Well, it's also, there's a lot of reflection there in terms of intergenerational living, let's put it that way. It used to be, in the area where I practice a good deal of my design work on Long Island, an area in which when young families finally did buy their homes, they bought it from people who sold their houses because they couldn't afford to live on Long Island any longer, and who moved to Florida or Carolina or someplace warmer with less taxes, which left a void in the lifestyle of young people who now could not afford for one parent not to work. So with a two-parent family working, if the grandparents moved away, they had to pay for childcare. They had to do other things which impeded their ability to have a certain type of lifestyle. With the advent on Long Island in the last decade or more of senior communities, over 55 communities, of which I do a great many of them, that enabled the homes to be sold to younger people that were 30 and 40 years old that they could then renovate at maybe a lesser cost than building new, and allowing grandparents to remain on the island for at least a good part of the year so that they could watch the grandchildren while the parents were working. So the dynamics of living, as well as the design of homes, has been affected by the changes of the economics of the world today.
Now, let me just ask a quick question that goes along with that. And how has the client changed in those years as the generations changed?
Well, for one thing, interesting to say, I'll just allude to buying a car or a fur coat. In the years past, the car was a status symbol. You bought the most expensive car you could afford, and then you bragged about it. That was then. Today, you seek that expensive car and you brag about how little you paid for it. It's a different mindset in society today. We don't value paying full price for anything. We now value getting the deal. And it's in the same with interior design, except for one thing. There are compromises that you cannot make in quality anymore. There's a level to which you should not go below. People think that, oh, I'll buy this, I'll buy that to decorate my home and then in 2 years I'm going to change it, which never happens. Once it's there, life gets in the way. It's the kids' schooling, it's a wedding, it's bar mitzvah, it's a communion, it's college, it's something. And then you're looking at the sofa that should have been a better quality when you started, that was only temporarily there as a quick fix, and it's now 7 and 10 years down the road, and it's the white elephant in the room. So for me, I have to really get into the head and the pocketbook of the client and help them to determine what's the road to take to make a house look like $1 million and not cost it.
I assume in today's times, obviously, do you find that clients, like in other fields, check everything out on the internet, and they think that they become their own expert? In that case, how do you, as a designer, adjust the way you approach a client to deal with that aspect?
Well, first of all, I have great respect for my clients. Anyone who will ask the professional their opinion has my vote, because I ask professionals their opinion every day of the week. I would not be my own accountant. I would not represent myself in a court of law. I go to a professional if I want to get the right answers. If someone comes to me as a professional and asks me questions, and they like the answers, they will also realize that there will be a big difference between them doing it themselves with the help of the internet and the mother-in-law and all the good friends who have an opinion and whoever else.
Usually wrong.
Or whoever it is, and what I can bring to the table. We are a service business, just like you are. Richard, you're not a numbers person only. When
Very
you
much,
come
very
to
little.
help me, you advise me. You give me information that helps me to grow my business. When I go and meet someone, I rarely only talk about what I'm going to put in the rooms. I really more talk about the lifestyle they aspire to and how I can help them get there. And whether they paint the walls pink, blue, or yellow really doesn't matter to me. And whether they want to spend $5,000 on a sofa or $1,500 on a sofa or $500 on a sofa really doesn't matter to me. It's all about how the space is allocated. And when you and I talk about building and construction and designing homes, we always talk about the fact that people have to live there. We're not creating something in our own image. We're creating something for which they want to be able to happily live for many years. That's the job of a good designer, a good builder, a good anybody.
I think you hit upon a very good point. It's their home, it's not our home. And I think that's similar to, you said before, as a CPA. Look, I may have a way of looking at things. I may even have an opinion as to the way I would go. But in the approach, you can give people options, and you can give people, and they can then have the knowledge to be able to choose among different paths.
Making good choices.
I would assume that that's the same in design.
Making good choices is part of my strength, because people think that interior designers just pick pretty things. What we really do is we narrow the field down so that the clients can choose within a framework of what we know they will like, whether it's A, B, or C, and let them then choose. I'm not going to let them make a mistake, but I am going to allow them the latitude of creating their own environment. That's my job. But my job is to be able to take them and lead them to the place where they can make good choices and help them to coordinate it. Most everybody who hires a professional has good taste. They sort of know what they like, and if they don't, we can sort of help them, or they'll know what they don't like. But the job of a good designer is to help them create a home in their own image, not in mine, that works for them, not only for now, but for the long haul. You talk about change. Change is critical in the world of interior design, but there's nothing new under the sun.
Now, you have a relationship with each and every one of your clients, and you have tools in your toolbox of design that started off with the sample book. Has technology impacted
and the graph paper and pencil?
Yes, and has technology upgraded what you can provide to your clients as services?
Absolutely, absolutely. And thanks to my team, I have been able to come into the 21st century running ahead of the pack, because designers who have been in business as long as I have don't always have the skill set to take up the new technology of today's modern needs generation. And they want it now, they want it yesterday, they want to see it, send it to them via email, they don't even want to come into the office, which I discourage because most times they don't even know what they're looking at. But we do now have AutoCAD, which is a system which allows people to see a floor plan in the computer and which enables the designer to now make changes quickly, within a fraction of seconds, as opposed to having to redraw a floor plan as in the days when I used to do that. But the strength and skill, and I believe it was mentioned in one of our former shows by our architect, Wendy, who said, those tools are only as good as the hands and the mind that manage them.
with respect to those tools, and again, we've had tools and they're not really adapted that much in America. I know we've had when you talk about the show, we had BIM, which is used overseas. Our architects of mostly do not use it, although our younger architects use it. All of these things are means of us going ahead and being able to have change. The people today. Like you mentioned, people coming into the office. Okay, everything is pretty much over the internet. Emails, contracts, financial statements, tax returns. There is very little human interaction. Do
Not
people
in my
resist?
business, Richard.
Do people resist the interaction?
No, they welcome it. They need it. And I physically take them shopping after we sit down and go over a floor plan that we've taken. We take field measurements in the house. We present the plan. We take them shopping to fill the needs. I'm there for accessorizing. One of the successes of a business like mine is the fact that we are very hands-on. We're communication needy people. If I don't know what colors you like, and I don't know what styles you like, and I don't draw out those answers from you, I can't feed back to you the things that I know will please you.
And if you don't go to the person's home, you probably have no clue what's there.
Absolutely. So we take pictures. We do before and after. When our work is published, we write about the stories. I often write about the stories of my day, and they are amazing stories. And today, I think more than ever, the young people who are coming into the field need to know this, that they must be able to communicate. The skill set that they learn in school to do AutoCAD or BIM is just the very beginning. If you cannot get your ideas across and listen, really listen to what people say to you and what their needs are in terms of what they can't even express, you'll never be a good designer, as good a technician as you might be.
Part of being a good designer is creating perception. Perception with something that doesn't cost a lot. How, if you were outside and you were designing something of interest outside, what would you do to make an outside of a house look interesting?
The same as the inside. With a little bit of money, I use color in my toolbox. I'll paint a wall a bright or a bold color. I will allow a focal point to exist, even though there isn't a lot of money. In the outside of a home, a simple box is not appealing. Curb appeal is critical.
How do you create? Okay, people have, and this pretty much goes into the real estate market. You have a very tough real estate market. I know one of the things that Ken's involved in is real estate brokerage, etc. How does one create curb appeal, or should one go? How can the creation of curb appeal affect the resale value of the house much more than what one would imagine?
Okay. Well, I'll take it from my point of view, and feel free as the realtor to jump in as well. When I come in to stage a home, or I prepare a home for getting ready to sell it because I've been hired to move the people, the first thing I look at is whether there's a front porch or not. Are there plants that dress the sides of the entry to the house? Because that front door and the entry hall is the whole thing that opens up the good energy of a house. A simple thing like the light bulbs, are they working? If the lights are not working on the outside of a house, if the plants are dead, if there's debris all over, these are things that are simple to do, and yet the people forget about the obvious. I walk into homes, and you know what I tell people to do when I'm with them? Close the door, go outside, make believe you don't live there. Look at your home with the eyes of someone who's never been there before. Do you see the shoes on the floor? Can you open the front closet? Is the faucet dripping in the powder room? What's piled up on the steps going up? People see this and are very forgiving of themselves. I have zero tolerance for that. For me, if a home is not organized and utilized properly with proper storage and a place for everything in its place, I cannot decorate it.
Well, that's interesting because people see their house as being theirs, and they have the mistaken, perhaps, belief that everyone else is going to have the same perception that the house that they see as, like I said, disorganized house, it should be really attributable to someone else, and then someone else will pay for it.
You have been into how many homes?
I've been into thousands of homes, and perception plays such a role in when you drive up that driveway and you can envision yourself either in that yard or in those rooms, and how the lighting comes through the windows and highlights
Whether the
different.
windows are clean or
If the
not, and
windows
the
are
lighting doesn't
clean.
go through. Right. The visualization of, it's visceral. In 2 minutes, they say a person can decide whether they're turned off or turned on to a certain home. Isn't that true?
And in thousands of showings, many house showings happen in just moments. 3-minute, 4-minute walkthrough of a home. They don't see the details, but they see the general feel of the home.
I could live here, is the thing you want people to be able to. I could see myself in this space. Well, why? Look beyond the Berba. And what I do, and I lecture on the topic of perception to realtors. But people cannot see beyond the Berber carpet or a green shag or the wood paneling on the walls from the 60s to see the scope of a room, or envision a room where if you took a wall down, you'd have this wonderful open space. So people pass by homes that really could be wonderful spaces for them to live in because they don't have the ability to visualize. And in that regard, I just want to mention the new technology can be extraordinarily helpful for people to see and visualize what they need to see.
Very interesting. And maybe a second question, or maybe even a second point. I know it's a little bit out of the box. Most of real estate today is obviously over the internet. You have 5, 10, 15 pictures, maybe a rolling picture or whatever. And no one has a visual within any of those real estate of what the house could be, or perhaps even sell the house as a different house than one house. Is that a potential for the future that people may consider, that instead of having that which you have, which is perhaps the contemporary that looked good 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but maybe the colonial or something else, or maybe a model that's convertible today, or size, or something that's more apt to the 2-acre property it's on today. Is that something that a designer could now look at as in conjunction with a real estate agent, or is it that is that something a real estate agent or a homeowner would potentially consider in selling a house?
Well, to respond to that in 2 ways, I think it is perhaps a new avenue for designers to be able to work in conjunction with realtors. But from my experience, the homeowner themselves realize that they are at a loss. And I have been oftentimes called in as a consultant to go to a home that someone is considering, not because the house is so great, but because, as you have alluded to before, the location is really good. And so the house might be undervalued for the location, but needs a lot of work. Now they either call in an architect or a designer to confer with them to make a decision as to whether they even want to put a bid on the house. It happened to me only a couple of weeks ago, where a young couple was referred to me who wanted to live on a certain block in a very desirable area. And the home and the property was unique in that it was an oversized lot. And the home that they wanted was really basically a tear down. So they were paying the price, which was quite overpriced, for this property, minus the house, except for the fact that they had to now spend money to take down the house before they could actually rebuild. So they charged me to come to the house, look at it, and offer them an alternative plan for what they could have in this house, and then actually bid it out. And when we did bid it out, they realized that this house is going to be probably about $400,000 more than the market would bear in that community, and they opted out, with the assurance that our firm will be hired the next time they find another house or finally buy one. So I think I actually talked myself out of a job.
But the interesting thing that you have there, and in CPA thing, is you almost become a risk avoidance, and in the financial world, an avoidance of something that could have become a disaster in terms of a house, in terms of a mortgage, in terms of an amount of money that the people would have, and it could be a burden in the future if you have a house which is $400,000 above the market.
Yes. And that's why, in good conscience, I could not advise them to buy the house unless they offered a bid that was much lower than he was willing to accept, the homeowner, who thought he had actual gold sitting in them there hills, and all he really had was a house that needed to have, the backhoe come in and take it apart and tear it down and rebuild it.
Now, as far as the new generation is concerned and the instant gratification it seems like many of our customers want, are you seeing more homes being fully turnkeyed as a move-in, designed, complete, done, ready to go. You just move in and you have your dinner party.
It's interesting you mentioned that because it's an area in which my staff and I are exploring now in terms of our own morphing and changing our company. One, bringing in new people and new ideas, instituting new technology, but also to be able to create something that is not necessarily as popular on the East Coast as it is on the West Coast, where a great deal of turnkey is being done. And so I am eager to experiment a little bit and work with builders and contractors to complete a turnkey or give alternatives for turnkey in one or two different types of models where people could choose what they want to do. I think that's coming.
Is it because the East Coast has more residential and the West Coast has more resort, that perhaps a different mindset has come in? And you also have technology on the West Coast where people expect things right away. East Coast has had a less building, less resort, less of those things.
I think that the West Coast is always the leaders, whether it is in green, health foods, coffee, whatever it is. I think that but it's something that has its time to come now, and I'm excited about the prospect of creating an environment with a make-believe client. Like I used to give my students at the design school. We made up the client, and I gave them a budget, and then they had to go out and shop for them. Well, now we'll have make-believe clients again, but I think now we're smart enough to know what the needs of most people are, and we're going to try to provide for those.
And I'd like to thank you, Natalie, for taking time and showing us a little insight into the skills that you've brought forward through your design efforts. And I'd love to turn the show back over to you for closing.
Well, I want to thank you both, and I enjoy very much being an interviewer, but it's nice to sometimes be interviewed as well, and I enjoyed that experience very much. I hope that our listeners out there today have seen the connection between the present and the future, and with the young people and the young ideas that are coming, and hopefully we as mentors to the future generation, I think we've got the connection that we really do need. I want to thank all of you for listening today. We'll be back with the next show very soon.